When Mark Carney stood in the House of Commons in Ottawa, there was no visible anger on his face, only a cold and clear determination. He did something that no one had imagined in the last 80 years. Canada had decided to step away from Washington. This was not a bargaining tactic or a momentary reaction of frustration. It was a carefully designed strategy called the Canadian Sovereignty and Independence Framework. This decision shook not only North America but the entire geopolitical structure of the world. The roots of this historic split lay in a pattern that had developed over the previous 18 months. Canada had increasingly come to believe that the United States was no longer a reliable partner. Warren Buffett once explained this idea perfectly. He said people can lie and promises can be broken, but patterns never lie. For a year and a half, Canada had been facing repeated threats, violations of trade agreements, and challenges to its sovereignty. These developments forced Ottawa to reconsider its long-standing alliance with Washington. Canada realized that staying tied to a partner that constantly changed its conditions and issued new threats almost every day was no longer a source of security. It had become a growing risk. When Carney revealed the pillars of this new strategy to the world, silence spread from the Pentagon to Wall Street. The first major move was in trade. Canada announced that it would shift the direction of its economy away from heavy dependence on the United States and toward global markets. For decades, nearly 75% of Canada's trade depended on the U.S. Now Ottawa aims to bring that number below 50% within the next 5 years. This means Canadian trains and ships will no longer move primarily south toward the United States. Instead, they will increasingly head toward Europe, Asia, and India. New ports and railway systems are planned to physically reshape Canada's trade routes and reduce reliance on its southern neighbor. The decision in the energy sector could be even more dramatic. For decades, Canada was often described as America's gas station. But that era may now be ending. Canada plans to redirect its oil and natural gas pipelines toward the Pacific and Atlantic coasts, allowing energy exports to reach countries that Ottawa believes respect its sovereignty. The cheap hydropower that once illuminated industries and homes in U.S. border states could now be reserved primarily for Canadian industries. In defense, the announcement sounded like a geopolitical earthquake. NORAD, the North American Aerospace Defense Command that has protected the skies over North America since the Cold War, has been placed under review. Carney made it clear that Canada intends to rely less on the United States for defending its borders, especially in the Arctic region. Instead, Ottawa has started forming new security partnerships with countries such as the United Kingdom, France, and Norway, notably excluding the United States. For Washington, this would be a massive strategic shock because Canada's cooperation has long been central to the defense of North America's northern frontier. Diplomatically, the situation has also changed dramatically. The so-called special relationship that every U.S. president and Canadian prime minister once praised has effectively been buried in history. In Ottawa, policymakers are no longer asking the question that once dominated discussions: what will Washington think? Canada is now trying to assert an independent global voice. As the news reached financial markets, economic tremors followed. The Dow Jones dropped sharply, oil prices surged, and the U.S. automobile industry, deeply dependent on Canadian parts and supply chains, faced sudden uncertainty. Then came the reaction from President Donald Trump. Instead of calming tensions, he escalated them. Trump issued stronger threats, launched personal attacks against Carney, and warned of economic retaliation. For many observers, this reaction only reinforced Canada's concerns. It showed exactly the pattern Ottawa believed it needed to escape: an ongoing cycle of pressure, threats, and unpredictable policy changes. Senior U.S. military officials and senators were reportedly stunned by the situation. Some described it as a self-inflicted strategic disaster. They warned that 18 months of hostility had destroyed a partnership that took decades to build. NATO allies also called emergency meetings, fearing that Canada's decision could weaken the foundation of the Western alliance. In the end, this story is not just about trade or tariffs. It is about national dignity and identity. Canada has demonstrated that when a country repeatedly feels disrespected and treated not as a partner but as a possession, it may eventually choose the hardest path: independence.